they attracted idealists who were really interested in the idea of open governance and decentralization.
Psychoanalysts made an interesting psychoanalysis of Elon Musk and the far right that's emerged among certain elements of the techno elite. So I myself have been a member of the tech industry for many years. And she does reference the fact that earlier versions of the tech industry, at least as it's perceived publicly, made a lot of discussions around making lives better for everyone, and we're all in it together, and so on, which is very different from the authoritarian tendencies of some of these new rightist movements among some segment of the tech industry. I wanted to point out that Elon Musk and Mark Andreessen and these neo-reactionary, neo-rightist movements, even though they are very powerful and very wealthy, they still don't represent even a majority of the moneyed class in the tech industry, and they certainly don't represent the majority of people among the rank and file, and even among the management class, let's say the executives within the tech industry. There has been, however, a movement towards a kind of us versus them mentality in the tech industry, even among those who still think of themselves as on, let's say, the liberal left among the CEO class. They have looked at Elon Musk and said, hey, why can't I do mass layoffs too? And it's become almost a disease that's spread within the tech industry. But I wanted to point out that still, Peter Thiel and Musk and Andreessen represent a minority, and they have complained about this many times in the past. One of the reasons Thiel left Silicon Valley was because he felt he was being oppressed by all of the left-wing people around him, even amongst his own investor class. He fled to LA thinking maybe LA would be more hospitable, but it really didn't turn out that way. And that's also why Elon Musk left LA for Texas. So they keep moving to more and more right-wing places because they haven't found a welcoming attitude among a lot of the rank and file people in the tech industry. And I think this actually feeds into their sense of being aggrieved minorities. So even though they have a lot of money and power and influence, they're still in the minority, even in the tech industry. And so they think, okay, well, we actually really know what we're doing. We're the richest people or whatever, and you know, we're the ones who are actually pushing the real tech industry. But I think in the back of their minds, they still think they don't even belong in the tech industry per se, at least when it comes to the majority of the views of us in the industry. I generally think her videos are very interesting, but I did want to also point out something which I would take a little bit of issue with, which is the idea that Elon and Mark Andreessen and so on are actually pushing this idea that they want to fix things. Even though that's the way they talk about it, I would say that as an engineer myself, I don't see what Musk is doing, at least recently, as being well executed at all from even a technical point of view. So yes, they talk about wanting to fix things, debug things, control things. But let's take what Musk has done more recently with Twitter. Twitter revenues are down by 90%. I mean, by any normal metric of success, it's been a complete disaster. The site is still functional, but they've lost so many users, they've lost so much influence, they've lost so much revenue. And I guess Musk thinks it's worth it, but it is not a matter of running things better than the previous management. What's going on in Washington, too, is a haphazard slashing of things. I mean, they fired the team that was managing our nuclear arsenal by mistake, I guess, but that is one of the most incompetent moves I could imagine. So I do feel that her analysis of them as feeling like they're on the outside and they have to take revenge against the others who they see as lesser than them, but it's also based on a fundamental insecurity, because I think they have felt throughout their careers, even in the tech industry, as being on the outside, and they're trying to take over to some extent. But even now, I don't think their views are the majority. There still are a lot of us trying to make the world a better place, however cliche that may be. And perhaps we aren't going to succeed, but that ethos has not been wiped out in Silicon Valley. I also want to make another point about the idea of escape, because I myself have been guilty, I suppose, of thinking, okay, I'm going to make a startup. We're going to do something that's outside the system. We're going to disrupt the system. But the idea is that we're going to do this because we want to help, everyone, not just a small group of people. And is this always wrong? I would say no, I don't think it's always wrong. I mean, a good example of this is what happened during the pandemic. For example, I was looking at the data and I could see that South Korea was going to do a much better job than the rest of the world, certainly of the United States. So we went there in March of 2020 and rode out about almost a year and a half of the pandemic in South Korea. And that really did turn out to be a good move. They did handle it in a much more competent way. Sitting there, we were actually insulated from a lot of the ravages that were happening elsewhere. South Korea never did a lockdown, and yet they managed to have a death rate of 1/6 that of the United States. They used high-tech contact tracing. They used mild social distancing regulations, and managed to get, in some ways, the best of both worlds. A relatively open society during the time of a lot of death going around, but they took the pandemic very seriously and very competently. This is what these techno-utopians want to believe they can do, but they haven't, the things that they're advocating aren't actually very effective, at least thus far. I don't see any evidence that they actually have come up with techniques and processes and so on that really are going to be significantly better than what's going on out there by default. But that isn't to say that there aren't places where you can go temporarily, at least, that are doing things better. There are such places, but those places are not doing things in a haphazard way or based on some kind of fear-based fantasy. So I actually think there is something to this, old school Silicon Valley idea that you can create a place. There are ways where smaller groups or smaller, like countries like South Korea or whatever, there are groups of people who can get together and do things in a better way. And that can, be a beacon to the rest of the world, maybe to copy what they're doing or to be inspired by it. That's what Silicon Valley was trying to be, at least for a while. And I'm hoping that it still survives. It definitely still survives among a lot of people in the tech industry. It hasn't been wiped out by guys like this.